And the Lord God said, "Worlds without number have I created, and by the Son I created them, which is mine only begotten. And as one earth shall pass away, and the heavens thereof, even so shall another come. And there is no end to my works." Far in the distant past, before time was, you and I and every person who has ever lived upon the earth dwelt in the presence of our Heavenly Father. There we grew in intelligence, saw worlds organized and peopled with kindred spirits. There we longed and prayed for the time when we could come to our own earth and take upon ourselves mortal bodies and be tried and tested in all things. And there stood one among them that was like unto God, and he said unto those who were with him, "We will go down, for there is space there, and we will make an earth whereon these may dwell, and we will prove them herewith to see if they will do all things whatsoever the Lord their God shall command them." So somewhere amidst the galaxies and the stars, our solar system was organized, drifting on the edge of the great Milky Way like puffs of dust in the vast oceans of space. A sun and 9 known planets. One of these planets was our Earth, a place where man could struggle and grow and seek for truth. Sir Isaac Newton, great physicist of the 17th century, had many arguments with an agnostic friend on whether the universe came about by chance or whether it came about by special creation. The story is told that one day...
Dr. Newton, I have great news. The Paris Academy of Science has accepted my paper. I've been invited to read it at the Sorbonne.
My congratulations.
Thank you, Sir Isaac. Now tell me, what have you been doing since we last met? Or is it a secret?
Oh, I have no secrets from you, my friend. But to tell you the truth, I haven't been making much progress in my experiments in the nature of light.
Why, what have we here?
It's a model of our solar system.
How very interesting.
Go on, turn it. It's perfectly harmless.
How very ingenious. Why, this is the most marvelous demonstration of our solar system I've ever seen. Schoolboy would understand this. Where did you get it? Who made it?
Nobody made it.
I'm serious. Where did you get this? It's extremely clever.
I'm serious too. This material just came together and assembled itself quite by chance.
Of course you're not serious, Dr. Newton. You and I know that the chance formation of such a thing is a physical impossibility.
At last, I've captured you in a web of your own making. See here. My friend, you admired this simple model I've made. Yes, I admit, I was its creator. This thing is a puny imitation of a much grander system with which you're already familiar.
You mean our universe?
Yes. Do you still think that this great universe, and this world of ours and everything in it, came about by chance? For every effect, there's a cause. To conceive this universe in all its marvelous detail required a cause, an intelligence, if you wish, which understood and compared the quantities of matter in the sun and planets, and understood the gravitating force between the sun and planets. Now, to adjust all this so delicately in such a marvelous variety of positions argues the original cause to be not blind and fortuitous, but extremely well skilled in mechanics and geometry. I like to think of this cause as God.
And today, too, men do not believe that order ever comes of itself. It takes intelligence to make and assemble the parts of an automobile, not to mention the miracle of the conception, birth, and organization of the extremely complex human body. This leads us directly to the same age-old controversy which confronts young people today, just as it did Newton. Did life on earth come about by orderly creation, as the revelations of God declare? Or did life come into being spontaneously by the chance meeting of elementary particles and without a guiding intelligence, as put forth by some skeptics? This theory has become very widespread, but a majority of scientists are now firmly convinced that creation was directed by an intelligent being. For instance, Cressy Morrison, prominent scientific reporter, has given us an illustration which suggests this premise. Suppose that you put 10 pennies, marked from 1 to 10, in a piggy bank. Now try to get them out in sequence from 1 to 10. Putting back the coin each time and shaking them all over again. Mathematically, your chance of getting out the one marked number 1 the first time is 1 in 10. The chances of shaking out 1 and 2 in succession are 1 in 100. The chances of shaking out 1, 2, and 3 in succession are 1 in 1,000, and so on. Your chances of shaking out all 10 numbers in succession would reach the unbelievable figure of 1 in 10 billion. Think of it. 1 in 10 billion. By the same reasoning, there are so many exacting conditions necessary for life to exist on this planet that they could not possibly have come into the proper relationship by undirected chance. For instance, as Morrison also points out, the Earth rotates on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, producing our days and nights of 24 hours. If the Earth rotated at only 100 miles per hour, our days and nights would be 10 times longer than they are now. During the day, the sun would likely burn up our vegetation, while during the long night, anything not destroyed by the sun would freeze. Again, the sun has a surface temperature of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and our Earth is just far enough away so that its fire warms us just enough, and yet not too much. Could that be by chance? If the sun gave off only 1/2 its present radiation, we would freeze. If it gave off half as much more radiation, we would roast. The Earth is tilted 23 degrees, and this gives us our seasons. Was this also by chance? And another thing, if our moon, instead of its actual distance of 238,000 miles, were only 50,000 miles from the Earth, the tides of the ocean would be so enormous that twice a day all of the continents would be submerged. Even the mountains would soon be eroded away. It is apparent from these and other examples that there is not one chance in billions that life on our planet is accidental. Dr. Edwin Conklin, Princeton University biologist, has compared the probability of the Earth being created by chance to that of the unabridged dictionary resulting from an explosion in a printing shop.
Anyone for Scrabble?
Many scientists of the 19th century were misled by certain of their observations, and as a result came to conclusions which were atheistic. But now even the most pragmatic materialist, in the face of present-day scientific knowledge, is led to the inevitable conclusion that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. The first great principle of science is that all nature is orderly in its behavior, and that it operates under a series of eternal, unchanging laws. Man has been able to duplicate some of the components of a simple cell, but even under the most favorably controlled laboratory conditions, a cell has never been observed to spontaneously come alive. In fact, if even the most simple cell in existence dies, we are still unable to bring it back to life. It's unimportant to know in exact detail how the earth and its life were created, for the Lord did it by means only dimly guessed by man as yet. But the important thing to know is that God is the Creator, and that He lives and is interested in us, and this we may know. Most scientists today agree on this one great truth: there is a God. Listen to Dr. Armin J. Hill, Dean of Physical and Engineering Sciences at Brigham Young University, as he gives the views of world-renowned scientists on this subject.
Acceptance of new information as it becomes available is the true scientific approach. When added knowledge points to new conclusions, a true scientist never hesitates to discard the old theory. In our world of research, it is to be expected that researchers will change their views and their conclusions as they develop new knowledge. It is no disgrace to change one's mind. By changing with newly acquired knowledge, science is able to advance. Dr. William F. G. Swan, international scientist and lecturer, bears this out when he says, "The man of science likes to separate fact from speculation. Now viewing the universe as a whole, I cannot escape the fact that it is of intelligent design. The universe shows, on a magnificent scale, the same kind of interrelationship of its working and planning as an engineer strives to achieve in his own understandings. It is not so much the failure to comprehend the universe which fills the man of science with awe, but rather the fact that in what he does understand, he sees a plan, not only akin to his own way of doing things, but one conceived with enormous cleverness. And so the man of science, conscious to some extent of how the thing is done, is much more impressed by the intelligent design of the universe than would be the unscientific man of past ages. A marvelous thing about the universe is the apparent simplicity of its fundamental design. It is the simplicity of the perfect genius. There are less than 100 different kinds of atoms composing the variety of forms of matter known to our everyday experience. But even these are built according to a common plan out of but relatively few kinds of fundamental particles, principal of which are only 3 different kinds: the electron, the proton, and the neutron. The laws governing the activities of these particles are relatively simple to the scientist. And yet out of these laws is fashioned all of the richness of nature. It is because of these laws of the universe, the laws of these fundamental particles, that we have light and mechanisms in our eyes to make use of it. It is because of them that we have been able to invent radar, later to find that the bat had used the same principle from time immemorial to enable him to fly with safety at night. It is because of these laws that the marvelous interrelation of organisms represented by our own bodies has become a reality. Now may I add my own observation that in the contacts I have had with many of the great scientists of this day, I have found most of them to be humble, sincere men, with attitudes which are closely in harmony with those I have quoted here. Also, may I say that all I have observed in nature, all I have studied in the fields of science, has strengthened my own profound conviction that God lives, and that what we see and experience as the physical world is his handiwork.
The director of the George C. Marshall Space Flight Center at Huntsville, Alabama, Dr. Werner von Braun, one of the world's foremost space authorities, expresses himself this way.
Today, more than ever before, our survival, yours and mine and our children's, depends on our adherence to ethical principles. Ethics alone will decide whether atomic energy will be an earthly blessing or the source of mankind's utter destruction. Where does the desire for ethical action come from? What makes us want to be ethical? I believe there are two forces which move us. One is belief in a last judgment, when every one of us has to account for what he did with God's great gift of life on the earth. The other is belief in an immortal soul, a soul which will cherish the award or suffer the penalty decreed in a final judgment. Belief in God and in immortality thus gives us the moral strength and the ethical guidance we need for virtually every action in our daily lives. In our modern world, many people seem to feel that science has somehow made such religious ideas untimely or old-fashioned. But I think science has a real surprise for the skeptics. Science, for instance, tells us that nothing in nature, not even the tiniest particle, can disappear without a trace. Think about that for a moment. Once you do, your thoughts about life will never be the same. Science has found that nothing can disappear without a trace. Nature does not know extinction. All it knows is transformation. Now, if God applies this fundamental principle to the most minute and insignificant parts of his universe, doesn't it make sense to assume that he applies it also to the masterpiece of his creation, the human soul? I think it does. And everything science has taught me and continues to teach me strengthens my belief in the continuity of our spiritual existence after death. Nothing can disappear without a trace.
Another eminent man of science, Dr. Harvey Fletcher, father of stereophonic sound, former director of physical research at Bell Laboratories, and professor emeritus at Brigham Young University, adds his testimony.
I myself have a firm belief that God lives and that life has purpose for each one of us living here upon earth. I did not obtain that faith through scientific reasoning, but rather through spiritual experiences which are hard to explain to others, but nevertheless are very real. It's been my experience that a great many men of science believe in God. True religion never hesitates to be held up for investigation by men of science. such men as Michael Faraday, Louis Pasteur, James Clerk Maxwell, Robert A. Millikan, Michael Pupin, all believed in God. Let me read to you the testimony of Michael Pupin. At the time this was written, he was president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Professor Pupin said, "The real purpose of science is not merely to make material things, inventions to increase wealth and comfort. If science does not help to give me and others a better faith to live by, a better understanding of the Creator, a closer relationship to God, so that I can carry out the divine purpose, then science is a failure. The soul of man is the highest product of God's creative handiwork. Now, after God had spent untold time in creating man and endowing him with a soul, is it reasonable to suppose that man lives here on earth for a brief span and then is extinguished by death? That the soul perishes with the physical body? That it existed in vain? There's a growing tendency in this age to think that as one becomes mature, one must throw off a belief in God, just as one discards his belief in Santa Claus. Just where would such a position leave us? We would be forced then to admit that this beautiful world of ours was not the product of design and planning, but of mere undirected chance. That your dearest friend is simply a jumble of atoms and molecules that just happen to land together to make a dear and loving personality. I feel certain that in our quest for the mysteries of the physical universe, that the Lord will guide and direct us into new scientific findings. I also feel certain that if we search for a testimony with the same vigor and energy, that we will find that too. I have.
Likewise, Dr. Henry Eyring, Dean of the Graduate School at the University of Utah, and recently elected National President of the American Chemical Society, says,
"There is no doubt in my mind that God lives. I've had no serious difficulty in reconciling the truths of science with the truths of religion. Moreover, God has instilled in us a desire to search after the truth. I'm thankful that I belong to a church whose doctrines can be subjected to every test. I recall the advice my father gave me as I left to study my freshman year at the University of Arizona.
Say, Dad, isn't it about time?
Yeah, let's see. That afternoon train leaves Pima about 5:30. We've still got a few minutes. Oh, you're going to Tucson to study science, huh? Well, now you're going to hear some things up there that don't jibe exactly with what you've learned in Sunday school, but don't worry about it. Just keep an open mind, and truth will eventually work its way to the surface. I don't worry about how much you learn. Study all the science you can. And if you'll remember your prayers and don't be profane, and live in such a way that you'll feel comfortable in the company of good people, then Mother and I will feel good about your going. And don't you worry about the gospel, son. It'll stand the test of all truth.
I appreciate what you're telling me, Dad, but let's not miss that train.
Well, see you later, Jeff. Seems like nowadays these young folks are always in a hurry. Well, come on, son. If it's speed you want, I'll show you how to make this board really rattle. Crank it up. Once more. There you've got it. Come on, boy. Make that train.
The Lord has instilled a desire to search for truth, that truth which my Father mentioned, into our very beings. Man, in his ceaseless search for truth, has discovered and partially explored 6 different worlds. The first of these, that wonderful, practical, everyday world in which we live. A world in which things are measured in feet and inches, seconds and hours and days. Then we have a second world, the world of the biologist, a world that is microscopic, where cells are usually about a 10,000th of an inch across and may divide every few minutes. Next, we delve into the chemical world of molecules and atoms, where the atoms complete their vibrations in 100 million millionths of a second. Inside the nucleus of the atom, we enter a fourth world, a world where things are happening millions of times faster still. There is also a fifth world that we are beginning to know, a world of vast distances, where astronomers measure the revolutions of the planets in years, and where the unit of distance used for measurement, the light year, is about 6 million miles in length. And finally, there is the spiritual world, where time is measured in eternities, and space is limitless. Thus, in our minds, we can travel from the almost infinitesimally small to the infinitely large. Now, curiously enough, there are good people who would have you believe that man, who understands all these wonderful things and masters them in part, is no more than the dust of the earth to which his body returns. To me, this is inconceivable. Today, the increasing effort to understand man's place in the grand scheme of things proceeds at an accelerated pace. The answer to this problem won't all be found in the laboratory, because many of the most important answers to the question, where did I come from, what am I doing here, and where am I going after death, will be found in the realm of the spiritual. And I don't think many scientists today would presume to say a thing may not be simply because they do not understand it, nor would they deny the validity of spiritual experiences of others because they have been without such experiences themselves. Just as science has proven a help to religion, so religion in its finest expression has given impetus to science. There is no end to the progress of a man who seeks for truth. Death is not the end. It is but one more step in the great forward march made possible by the redemption of the Savior. Of this I am convinced.